Good evening and good morning, depending where you are, and also good afternoon. So thank you for tuning in. We are very honored and pleased to have to host this CCG China-US think tank dialogue, which is a part of our ongoing 7th Annual China and Globalization Forum. And this dialogue was co-organized with Asia Foundation. So CCG China and Globalization Forum is CCG flagship annual forum that we hold once every year. And this year, actually, we have draw a very large attendance, and actually, since we had this in 2015, this is probably one of the largest. It has been hosted in conjunction with our CCG Council members. Also, we bring together most prominent business leaders, government officials, academia, and also non-government sector as well. I mean, during the last 2 days, we had 400 to 500 participants attended our conference, and now we are getting to the webinar part of our conference, which is also open to all participants and also can be watched online. This pandemic, which is going on, and now China also discovered new cases. So how can we really cope with that is one of the actually issues we talked about. And we had also discussed about global economy, trade, mobility of the people, China-European economic cooperation, global cooperation under China's new development plan, and of course, China's new international communication narrative as well. So on the US part, we're actually having 3 webinars that as our China-US part of the dialogue. And tonight is actually the feature webinar of China-US think tank dialogue, which we joined with 4 distinguished speakers. So today's dialogue actually features the theme of balancing competition and cooperation amongst the global challenges. What's next for the US-China relations? As we all know, last week, the US Deputy Secretary of State, Wendy Sherman, just concluded her first visit for the Biden administration of officials to China. And a new Chinese ambassador, Qin Gang, just arrived in Washington this week. So we have a lot of questions and a lot of curiosity and for how US and China can maintain its momentum of a diplomatic dialogue, but also we want to hear the views from our speakers today, which from Adam Posen, Steve Roy, John Thornton, and also Minister Zhu Guangyao. But let me quickly introduce our guests today. I'll do this as alphabetical order. Adam Posen has been the president of the Peterson Institute of International Economics since 2013. I mean, the Peterson Institute is well known, is an independent, non-profit, non-partisan research organization dedicated to strengthening prosperity and human welfare in a global economy through expert analysis and practical policy solutions. For his career, Adam has contributed to research and public policy regarding monetary and fiscal policies in the G20, the challenge of European integration, his adoption of the euro, China-US economic relation, which is a very active Peterson Institute, and develop new approaches for financial recovery and stability. During his presidency, the Peterson Institute has won global recognition as the leading independent think tank in international economics. And of course, we have our old friend, Ambassador Stephen Roy, and he's the Asia Foundation's trustee emeritus and also a former US ambassador to China. The Asia Foundation is a nonprofit international development organization committed to improving the lives across a dynamic and developing Asia. Ambassador Roy is a fluent Chinese speaker. Actually, he was born in China, and he actually spent time in Chengdu and has a lot of good fond memories there. And he spent much of his career in East Asia. and has a 3-time ambassador serving as U.S. envoy to Singapore and to People's Republic of China, 1991 to 1995, and also Indonesia. And in 1996, he was promoted to the rank of a Korea ambassador, the highest rank in the United States Foreign Service. Also now, Ambassador Rowe is the founding director, emeritus, and also distinguished scholar at the Wilson Center Kissinger Institute on China and the United States, and the trustee of a Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. As we all know that this year also marks the 50th anniversary of Dr. Kissinger's secret visit to China. So it will be probably one of our topics tonight as well. And of course, we have Mr. John Thornton, is the chair emeritus of the Brookings Institution and co-chair of Asia Society. So we know that Brookings Institution and Asia Society are two very prominent think tanks, and in the United States that really has a big influence, not only in the US, but also in the world and also in China as well. So John is actually chair of both organizations, speaks volumes. He's also the executive chairman of Barrick Gold and chairman of the Pine Bridge Investments. And of course, on top of that, John is also a professor and a director of a global leadership program at the Tsinghua University School of Economic Management in Beijing. John retired in 2003 as the president and a member of the board of the Goldman Sachs Group. So has a very long, rich career. In 2007, Institutional Investor magazine named Mr. Thornton as one of the 14 individuals who have the greatest influence in shaping global financial markets over the previous 40 years. And he was also a recipient in 2008 of the Friendship Award of the People's Republic of China, which is the highest honor accorded to the non-Chinese citizen. And also Chinese government also named him as one of the 15 foreign experts who has made most significant contribution to China's development over the previous 3 decades. So very notable achievement. Now I'd like to introduce my friend, also my colleagues at State Council, Minister Zhu Guangyao. And Minister Zhu Guangyao is a CCG advisor and a former Vice Minister of Finance of China from 2010 to 2018. As a Vice Minister of Finance, Minister Zhu oversaw the Customer Tariff Department, as well as coordinating economic track of the China-US Strategic and Economic Dialogue, and also the financial shepherd of the G20 for the ministry. I mean, he joined the Ministry of Finance in 1985 and served in various positions with the ministry, also included as a senior advisor, alternate executive director, and direct executive director of the China to the World Bank in 2 occasions. So actually, we are very pleased to be joined by Minister Zhu as well. Myself, I'm the founder and president of Center for China and Globalization, and also one of the leading Chinese think tank, and also we are one of the top 100 think tanks ranked by University of Pennsylvania. And Minister Zhu is also our advisor for the think tank. So this is a think tank dialogue we are between the Chinese and US think tanks. So I'm very pleased to be the host of this dialogue tonight. I would like to actually start with Adam. I mean, you are actually very knowledgeable. You've been traveling to China, and I see that you have made a lot of remarks about China, US, how it should collaborate, how they should improve, or how can, including the CPTPP and also a lot of trade issues. So maybe I'll start with you, and in your position as the think tank, what is the thinking of the U.S. economy, Chinese economy, and how we get out of this pandemic? How about the U.S.-China relations? What are the trade, which is one of the themes of our conference today? People view that as the biggest promoter for the global future development, as the World Bank chief said here in our conference today. So what do you think? I mean, as you are very savvy in this subject. Adam, your floor, please.
Thank you very much, President Wang, for including me on this distinguished panel, and congratulations to your center for continuing to lead substantive dialogue in China and globally. Obviously, this is a major conference. I think the big message of what the questions you raise is really to say that the US-China conflict and frictions are not about economics, even though they currently take place in economics. And this has been a major preoccupation under Trump and again under Biden. And as I argued in my recent article in Foreign Affairs on the price of nostalgia, it mostly is being driven by politics in both China and the US, where basically the males working in industry in non-urban centers are blackmailing the rest of society. And we see this with the state-owned enterprises in China. We see this with the trade bailouts of the heavy industry in the US. And in both countries, those parts of the economy are a shrinking part of the economy and a shrinking, even faster, part of employment. They also are industries that are, of course, toxic to our environment as well as to our politics. And so what we are seeing is both the US, American, and Chinese peoples are being ill-served by the trade conflict. And it's not about economics. And so what we've seen under the Biden administration, and in response in part and in part of its own initiative from the Xi government, is a shift now from trade to worrying about technology. Obviously, there have been frictions for many years. The others on this panel have been dealing with them directly for even longer than I have. Over issues of intellectual property, over issues of government subsidies. But for the most part, these have not been issues that should have imperiled the broader relationship on any economic basis. What has escalated it now is the sense in the US and China that each is posing a genuine threat in a geopolitical sense, and in a sense to their system or their legitimacy. And this is a reality among the official class in both Washington and Beijing. There's some good reason for it. It's mostly exaggerated. And it colors, of course, every interaction. And so the question is, what can we do from here? Let me make three very brief points so you can get to the others on the panel. First, remember that both the US and China have led the world in recovery from the COVID crisis and are both growing well above trend growth rates right now by a large margin. So this is not a question of either is depriving the other of economic recovery. So there is no conflict over currency right now. There is no issue of Chinese surpluses coming at US expense. There is no issue of financial instability being promoted from one to the other or back and forth. So we have to focus on the non-economic issues, which is funny for an economist like me to say. The second point is, as you've indicated in your setup for this discussion, President Wang and others I know have spoken about, it, even though it's boring, it has to be said. The biggest opportunity for collaboration between China and the US is on climate change issues. That was the case when President Obama was here, when our friend Minister Zhu was very active in the G7 and the G20. And that remains the best place for us to collaborate at this time. And third, since you were wise enough and generous enough to convene a group of think tankers, I just want to say that we, like CCG, Peterson Institute, Brookings, the Kissinger Center, the ministry's own Ministry of Finance own think tank, we all have a role in continuing to say that we should not be afraid of honest dialogue among experts. We have a common enemy in conspiracy theories and disinformation. And we think tanks should be bounding ourselves together to emphasize the possibility of objective analysis and honest, frank talk. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you, Adam, for your great opening remark. Absolutely. I mean, I agree with you that it seems that non-economic issue that really deterred us from talking of the real substance, and where at the time we need to collaborate on pandemic fighting, climate change, and many other things. So this is really needed, a frank dialogue between the two sides think tanks. So you're absolutely right. Perhaps I can also let the Ambassador Rod to give some opening remark as well. I mean, you are a seasoned diplomat. I mean, you also know China since you were a child. You lived through, many years of turmoil and all the times. And I remember visiting you in your office when I was as a visiting fellow at the Brookings in 2010. I mean, you showed me all those good, photos and things like that. So I would like to really ask, you witnessed so many things in China. So now we have a ambassador, a new Chinese ambassador go to the U.S. We don't know when is the U.S. ambassador to China, but we had a visit of Deputy Secretary Wendy Sherman. So what's your take on the Sino-U.S. relation, past, present, and future? Because you were also the founding director of a Kissinger Institute. And this year is 50 years of Kissinger's secret visit to China. We had just the other day on the 11th of July, we had a live dialogue to commemorate his historic visit. We had a dialogue with Dr. Kissinger that day. And so you must have a lot of feelings on that since your institute at Wilson Center is named after him. And of course, this year is also China joined the UN for the 50 years. China joined WTO for 20 years. China joined APEC for 30 years. And it's the Cold War ending 30 years. So a lot of things going on, past, present, future. So as a senior, as seasoned as you, I mean, your voice is really, thinking is really much noticed here. So Ambassador Roy, your turn, please.
Thank you, Dr. Wang, and good evening to all of you who are in China. When President Trump lost the November 2020 presidential elections in the United States, some people hoped that President Biden would adopt a less confrontational approach to relations with China. They have been disappointed. Early steps by the new American administration toward China seem to be a continuation of President Trump's hardline policies. Shortly after the administration took office, the new Secretary of State echoed the charge of his predecessor that China was engaged in genocide against the Uyghurs in Xinjiang. The tariff barriers on bilateral trade have been left in place. Senior officials in the Biden administration bluntly stated that the U.S. engagement strategy toward China had failed and that competition is now the principal driver in the bilateral relationship. For much of the last 50 years, the United States was confident that China's growing wealth and power did not threaten United States' vital interests and that differences could be managed by diplomacy and engagement. That is no longer the case. And the question is, why? A starting point to understanding what has happened is to recognize that the United States and China are both in the midst of fundamental transitions that affect their respective places in the world. The United States is seeking to adjust to an international situation in which it is no longer the sole superpower. This is not so much because of a decline in power, but because other countries have risen to major power status, and China, of course, is the first and foremost example of that. A new multipolar world is emerging. Not surprisingly, the United States is reluctant to give up the dominant position that it has occupied since the end of the Cold War. and to accept the adjustments that it must make in order to establish a new equilibrium. At the same time, there is no question that the social and political polarization that has been a prominent feature of the US domestic scene over the last half decade has damaged the international image of the United States and the perception of its reliability as a great power. China, in turn, in a remarkably short period of time, has regained the wealth and military strength that are the attributes of major powers. This has altered the psychology of the Chinese people. This is what Zheng Bijian didn't take into account when he came up with the concept of peaceful rise. The Chinese people now are demanding a more muscular foreign policy, consistent with China's growing power. And it has changed China's behavior patterns, which have become more assertive. As a result, regional countries, including the United States, find China's assurances less and less credible that it will rise peacefully and never bully its neighbors. These are two of the key background factors that have influenced the sharp plunge in the bilateral US-China relationship to the lowest depths in half a century. This has created a dangerous situation where missteps by either side or by both could plunge the world into an unprecedented crisis. I use the term unprecedented because China and the United States are both major nuclear powers, and confrontations between them are particularly dangerous. Repair work by both sides is vitally necessary. Fortunately, despite some superficial similarities, the Biden administration is fundamentally different from its predecessor. President Biden has more foreign policy and national security experience than any American president since the first President Bush 30 years ago. In contrast to the Trump administration, President Biden has appointed capable and experienced officials as Secretary of State and National Security Advisor. These are officials who could sit down without talking points and talk for hours with Chinese counterparts about any issue in the world. And this was totally missing in the last administration. The Biden administration is moving carefully to iron out internal differences and adopt sustainable policies that will not simply reflect the whims of the moment. Of particular importance for US-China relations, the administration has reaffirmed that it will adhere to a one China policy and that it does not support independence for Taiwan. It is also seeking a pattern of regular consultations between Beijing and Washington. The recent consultations between US Deputy Secretary of State Wendy Sherman and State Counselor Foreign Minister Wang Yi and Vice Minister Xie Feng were surrounded by a barrage of charges by each side against the other. However, if one reads carefully the public reports regarding the consultations, it is evident that there were constructive elements. According to the Chinese account of the meeting, Deputy Secretary Sherman called the US-China relationship the most important bilateral relationship in the world, noted the many times the two sides have had contact with each other since President Biden was sworn in, expressed US willingness to have open and candid contacts and dialogues with China, declared the United States hopes the two countries can coexist peacefully, said the United States has no intention of restricting China's development, does not want to contain China, and would like to see China develop further. Noted the two sides can engage in healthy competition, cooperate on climate change, drug control, and international and regional hotspots, and strengthen crisis management capacity and avoid conflicts. American accounts of the meetings she had are consistent with the above statements. These are encouraging words that you would not have heard from the previous administration, but the reality is less positive. President Biden needs congressional support for his domestic programs, and congressional attitudes toward China are hostile. Changing these attitudes will be difficult, but not impossible. A hardline American approach to China does not mesh well with the interests of US allies and friends in East Asia, who do not wish to see the region polarized. In other words, as the United States tries to work with our friends and allies, it will discover that they do not support a hardline approach to China. And I think that will have an impact over time. But as a first step, it would be useful for both China and the United States to tone down their rhetoric toward each other. Governments have the responsibility not only to formulate wise foreign policies, but to talk in ways that develop public support for those policies. And we are not doing that. We are talking publicly in ways that undermine the wise policies that we should be pursuing. And so, as a starter, let's get our rhetoric under control. And I hope that we'll have some chance to exchange views about other steps that could be taken. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ambassador Rao. Yeah, you have made, I think, very good opening remark. This is really, I agree, deep concern on both sides. I mean, that we seems to, really quarrel, argue, and yell, and I agree that Trump has done quite a lot of probably damage to the existing relations. But of course, there's a lot of problems also. But the problem is that I think in the Trump administration, the core team he used is not that really, as you said, savvy on China. I mean, I had a debate at the Monk debate with H.R. McMaster. I mean, he's a journal fighting in Iraq and maybe not really that knowledge on China. We had Michael Pillsbury. We talked about, but he's also more on the military front. So we are actually really lacking a great Chinese China hand in the Trump administration. But we see that absolutely. You're right. I mean, in the Biden administration, we see Biden has a long knowledge of foreign policy, as you said. He has met President Xi, spent more time than any other leaders in the world. And he actually called the Chinese people on the eve of Chinese New Year, say Happy New Year to President Xi. And he actually stopped the use of referring virus to China virus. He issued some kind of executive order on that. So all those good, I think, has been noticed. But somehow lately, we see there's some acceleration of changes, maybe from China's point of view, because we had the G7 summit. There's also a schedule on China. There's a NATO summit. There's a US-EU summit. There's a US-Russian summit. So now I'm glad that the Deputy Secretary Sherman visited China. So we hope that we're going to start a new dialogue. You're right. I think the dialogue this time in Tianjin was quite more concrete now. There's a lot of issues has been raised, a lot of concrete lists have been proposed. We hope to reduce all those frictions maybe on both sides. One of the things I think probably really concerned on China is this tracing this origin of virus. I mean, that is already be actually criticized when they run the election. The Democrats already said that is really a conspiracy because the WHO already sending a delegation, went to China, Wuhan, went to the lab, and they come with a suggestion that least possible to have this kind of this is man-made virus. So issues like that, and to have a FBI or CIA to make a conclusion on that is really something I think probably we should not to really emphasize too much on that, because it's going to divide I think the current efforts to really trying to get a dialogue on. So I don't know if you have anything on that. I mean, this virus issue is really getting a little hot on the Biden administration. I agree with you. Everything other Biden is doing is there's a host of minister dialogues between USTR, between the trade minister, the commerce minister, which is great. But this statement of virus sourcing, tracing origin is really not a practical idea. I don't know if you had any comments on that, Ambassador Roy.
A very brief comment. This in particular is an issue on which we should be cooperating and not fighting each other. I think it is important to trace the origins of the virus, and we have our own views about how that should be pursued. But the basic point is pandemics threaten every country in the world. And if the two leading countries in the world are unable to cooperate in dealing with a common threat, then there's something wrong with both of us. And we need to consider what the problem is that is preventing us from cooperating on this very vital issue.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you. I think that is really a key issue. U.S. and China should really now, with the mutant of this virus, we should really work together to fight that. You know, this morning we had in the conference, we had 15 ambassadors from, you know, all countries, Europe, Asia, Latin American, and also we have the U.S. Minister Consular attending the conference this morning as well. You know, that is really, you know, they all agree that the whole world should act together. We should, you know, making the mobility of the people around the world and have the vaccine passport or certification and find out the ways how we can really make the economic goes around movement, rather than we focus on those tiny, not tiny, but, you know, there's non-urgent issues, because virus happened actually before, also in some cases, maybe even before Wuhan, but let's do it, you know, if we do it, we do it systematically, maybe what we really contend about, rather than pinpoint on that as well. No, I think that's probably what we can talk later. But again, I hope we're not, you know, getting into that too much. But I'd like to invite Minister Zhu now. Maybe, you know, after hear two think tank leaders from the U.S., you are, you know, CCG advisor, and also you are also working the think tank of the Ministry of Finance. So you attended our conference this morning and speaking with other Chinese business leaders and government officials. Also, former Minister of Trade, Minister Chen Deming also spoke. Vice Minister Chen Jian of Commerce also spoke, and also a host of other international experts. So, what's your take about this U.S.-China relations? Since you've been really working on this for you know, for a long time, and really a top expert in China on the subject, because you really led the strategic and economic dialogue. You were the shepherd of G20. So what's your take on that?
Thank you very much. It's my honor to join this distinguished panel, particularly after the President Posen and Ambassador Roy's speech. I think I just try my best to directly discuss and some response for Adam's side and Ambassador Roy's side. Firstly, from the trace origin of virus, I remember in April last year, I had this phone call with Adam regarding how about China-US cooperation to deal with the challenge of pandemic. That time, Adam suggests the two great countries must be cooperate, must enhance the transparency, and must together within the WHO. That time, U.S. administration, you know, that's attitude to WHO. But Adam, from that time, firmly support WHO plays a leading role and emphasize the importance of cooperation between China and the U.S. to deal with the challenge of pandemic. And I remember very clearly, he also suggested us to pay attention to the situation development. Even after China control the situation well, the global situation may be continue deteriorate. And he point 3 issues: India, Iran, and Indonesia. He suggests us to think about if there's a deteriorated situation continually in the world, and particularly 3I country is very difficult. Unfortunately, what Adam said at that time, that's become the reality. Until today, the world still in the very difficult pandemic situation. And this is not just a public health risk. It's already become systematic risk in the whole world. Economically, governance issue also deeply be impacted, and really need China, US as two important economies cooperate together. But unfortunately, just as President Posen and Ambassador Roy said, that China-US relation now is really in the critical juncture. I think that's the big issue is less trust each other. And I think that's Posen side, something beyond the economy. That's the situation. But there's two important countries. We must keep communication and greatly increase understanding each other and try our best restore the trust. I know this is not easy to do, but I still think economic relation is anchor for our relations. Last year, China-US trade volume 580 billion. First half of this year, that's increased more than 50%. That's the total amount. First 6 months of this year, US-China trade already 340 billion. So big pressure politically and other negative impact, including both sides, public opinion negative. And we see the trade still increase. That's a good thing. That's why that's a good thing. That's, I think that's a very deeply integrated economy, made our interest is so close connect. But we should Adam Posen agree with him. That's a trade war, tariff to technology war. That's a very negative impact. How we restore that basic communication now is really important. Just now, Ambassador Roy mentioned the Biden administration team is professional. I agree with that. I deal with many officials now in this team. I understood they are indeed professional. But I must point out some key issues Biden administration should correct immediately, since that is within US interest, including tariff. And just as Secretary Yellen said, that's not US interest. That's damage the benefit of US consumers. But until now, 6 months passed and no any single change. And very key issue beyond tariff, economic side, I think political side, the Ambassador Roy mentioned the genocide issue. That's absolutely wrong. The judgment made by last administration within last 2 weeks in position. And they use this as a reason block import of cotton and tomato produced in Xinjiang. Unfortunately, Secretary of Biden administration, Secretary of State, that's still conform that's previous policy and continually to blame the Xinjiang in genocide to Xinjiang, to Uyghurs. That's absolutely wrong, and that's dangerous for China-US relation. And if let's talk about just as Ambassador Roy said, that his word is unprecedented risk. I think this one is that's real cause to result in the conflict, because we never think we take action against the terrorists and against international terrorists to be the genocide. So this one, we must be use public and private communication to solve. And that's why China welcome the foreigners to visit Xinjiang. And I know that foreigners, they say they want very freely visit. So that's a debate. We should have real professional way to solve this problem. I think that these obstacles we must overcome. We must find real fact to solve this problem. This very key for Chinese principles. Just one case. And I do think such as communication, both sides see very clearly to the point on the table is very useful. As Adam suggests, he suggests three, that's the point. I think that's very, very important. One, Adam said something beyond economic situation. Yes, we should have the more comprehensive discussion. And for this one, we should find a way how to expand our discussion beyond economic. Also, I think that everything will connect with economic relations, because our entrepreneurs need this good environment for their investment in China, or Chinese enterprise investment in US. We should find the way. And second, climate change certainly becomes as real the way for cooperation, including ESG. I think this already beyond the pure climate change issue, and that's more broad, more comprehensive. And think tank certainly is that real channel for our cooperation. In this regard, I think as maybe very quickly 4 points suggestion. One is we, China, US must find the way to deal with each other's challenge and to develop peaceful coexist, and based on communication, based on understanding each other, and enhance our cooperation to the peaceful coexist. Second, we must keep open and reform both China and the US. China is more deepening structural reform, more open to the outside world. That's our domestic interest first, and also in line with global cooperation. This one, we have many ways, many things can be discussed. Third point is we must have real cooperation on multilateral system, trade, financial, WHO, IMF, World Bank, and other UN special agencies. And this global network that's need our cooperation to maintain it, to improve it, to enhance it, and make that the world is in peace and development. The last one, certainly, I suggest we keep this real dialogue, communication, and we need real mechanisms such as SED, such as BIT in Obama administration. We negotiate. I joined that deeply. I know near 90% of BIT we finished. That's last very important issue we not solved is digital economy issue related. That's data flow, cross-border, data privacy issue. That's today become more important. And now every country, including US, China, EU, and others, to emphasize domestically how important to development of digital economy, to enhance the security of cyber system, and enhance the privacy. And those all need this global coordination, global negotiation. Maybe one break point possible is e-commerce negotiation in WTO. I know that's still very difficult. We should try. And that's for the future growth. And that's a real need for our cooperation between China, US. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Minister Zhu. I think you have raised many good points as well. And one of the particular points I really strongly agree with you. I think there's quite a bit of probably misunderstanding on the issues in Xinjiang. And of course, China has in the past has no experience dealing with terrorism. There could be some, the way they handle, needs to be improved. But definitely, it's far from genocide. I think, that Pompeo has actually think about that term. And then while Blinken testified at the Senator, he in order to get passed, and he probably went along with what Pompeo suggested. But then they don't have to own it. I think that the Xinjiang now is really open. I mean, all the foreigners can go there. I recently, we talked to some China foreign embassy officials actually in the conference. They actually, the ambassador didn't go, but the embassy staff did send people there. They all come back with their own report. I mean, it's obvious. There's nothing like said as a genocide happened. So any foreigners, you go to Xinjiang, there's no restriction. Just buy your ticket and you can go. So and see whatever you like to see. So I think that issue has to be sorted out so that we can reduce the tension, and also seeking more collaboration, as the Minister Zhu mentioned about this BIT. If it's 90% concluded, why can't we continue this 10%? Because data and issues like that, after 6 years now from Obama administration, we have a lot of new progress now. China is a big data country, and he realized data is oil. If you don't flow, there's no wealth in being created. So many channels, like China recently agreed to join this OECD G7 proposal of a minimum global corporate tax, which is a good example how we can avoid these loopholes, and that really, the money can really benefit both the host and home country. And also we can talk on WTO, as Minister Zhu said, and also CPTPP, as Biden-Obama administration, which concluded. China announced they're going to join in, and Minister of Commerce has put TPP agreement on the Minister of Commerce website. So that's the standard, that's the target, that's where we should aim for. So, I mean, China is not afraid of talking to those points, but I hope that we have more channels to talk, including WTO, so that we can do that. But now I really would like to invite our very senior panelist, also very highly influential. I mean, John, you are the honorary chair for Brookings for a long time. I know that Brookings even set up a China Center called your name, John Sutton China Center. And of course, that has already been over 10 years. During my days at Brookings, you already, that is already called John Sutton Center and the China Center. But also now you are the co-chair of Asia Society. Asia Society is very influential bridges between China and the US. And so you're on top of that. And even more so, you are very familiar with China. You are the first probably American to be a professor at the Tsinghua Economic Management School. So, we have been talking so far, your wisdom, your suggestion is absolutely highly expected, because I remember last year during the same conference at the CCG annual forum, you spoke with us last year, talk about this deficit of trust, how to build up the trust. Now, half year into the new administration,